David McBride. If you haven't heard the name before, you better get used to it because I have a feeling you'll be hearing it quite a bit in the coming weeks. Who is David McBride? He's an Australian whistleblower and former Australian Army lawyer who served twice in Afghanistan. David McBride blew the whistle on alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. For disclosing information to journalists in 2016 relating to those alleged war crimes, he's facing a potential life sentence. Even if you haven't heard of David McBride before, you may remember this.
Australian federal police officers are this afternoon continuing to raid the ABC's Sydney headquarters. It's over a series of 2017 stories known as the Afghan Files. The stories by ABC investigative journalists Dan Oakes and Sam Clark revealed allegations of unlawful killings and misconduct by Australian Special Forces in Afghanistan. They were based on hundreds of pages of secret defence documents leaked to the ABC.
You can check out his story in his own words on his YouTube channel. It's well worth a look and I'll put a link in the description. This case has been hanging over the guy's head for years. And for what? There's absolutely no public interest in continuing to pursue this prosecution. Independent MP Andrew Wilkie sums up the situation fairly well.
Mr David McBride, a former military lawyer, is facing 5 charges relating to the disclosure of information that is undeniably in the public interest, including credible evidence of war crimes committed by Australian Defence Force personnel in Afghanistan. B. Mr McBride faces court on 13 November 2023 and will be the first person on trial in relation to alleged war crimes committed in Afghanistan. He faces the very real prospect of spending years in prison simply for telling the truth because of this Australian government prosecution. David McBride is the whistleblower who revealed evidence of allegations of war crimes in Afghanistan, and he will be the first person to front a court in regard to those war crimes and faces the prospect of years in jail. Deputy Speaker, this is a nonsense. It has to be dealt with absolutely immediately. So I call again for a suspension of the standing orders so we can have a proper debate about this, we can vote on it and we can lay the foundation for the government to drop the charges against these 2 brave Australian whistleblowers. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
The whole thing is a nonsense. When Andrew Wilkie tried to push the government to have the charges thrown out, the only support he received was from the crossbench.
Every day the government lets the prosecution of these 2 men continue is having a chilling effect on anyone who is considering revealing unlawful and other wrongful conduct inside the Australian government, because these prosecutions send a very clear message that to blow the whistle is to bring the full force of the law down on your own head, and the cost of courage is too high. To be fair, the prosecutions of Richard Boyle and David McBride commenced under the prior coalition government, but it is the Albanese government that has allowed the prosecutions to continue.
And I echo the words of the member for North Sydney, that the prosecution is unjust, and the community will look at the prosecutions of Boyle and McBride and it will have a chilling effect on whistleblowers in this country standing up.
Boyle and McBride are paying an immense price for telling the truth. Their reward for acting in the public interest is harassment by prosecution, and this suspension motion is valid and urgent because these men face jail for helping reporters tell the truth about matters of public and national interest. They face jail for telling the truth. Time and again, we've seen the consequences faced by whistleblowers. So while I respect the Attorney General's commitment to the separation of powers, the urgency of this is a potential miscarriage of justice. It's high time that the Attorney intervened to drop these cases. There is no public interest served by seeing McBride or Boyle convicted and serving time in jail.
Order. The question is that the motion be agreed to. All of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. No. I think the noes have it. Is a division required? Ring the bells for 4 minutes.
Order. The result of the division is ayes 15, noes 83. The matter is resolved in the negative.
So Labor and the Coalition band together to ensure the prosecution continues. It shouldn't really be a shock, I guess, given that Labor have been more than happy to allow this to continue for the 18 months or so they've been in power, and that the Coalition were the ones that allowed this to all kick off in the first place. Yes, I know Labor have only been in power for 18 months, but here's the reality. The Attorney General has the power to put a stop to this
Nonsense
right now. He's just choosing not to.
It's true, as the member for Clark has pointed out in his motion, that the Attorney General has power under the Judiciary Act to discontinue proceedings, and it's also true, as he appeared to accept in speaking to the House, that that power to discontinue proceedings is reserved for very unusual and exceptional circumstances.
He can talk about whistleblower protections and what the government have been doing, but the reality is they've just been scratching around the edges without making any meaningful change. And this is a reality that Andrew Wilkie has called out.
We see that the amendments to the Public Interest Disclosure Act within the term of this government have been very minor. They're what an IT company might call a patch.
When pressed on why he has not acted to stop the prosecution, Mark Dreyfus often drops the term exceptional circumstances.
That power to discontinue proceedings is reserved for very unusual and exceptional circumstances.
The interesting thing here is that in Section 71 of the Judiciary Act, there's no mention of exceptional circumstances. There's nothing in there that says the Attorney General can only exercise his authority if exceptional circumstances exist. I'm definitely not the only one to have picked up on this. Independent MP Allegra Spender has put some very pointed questions to the Attorney General. I've bookmarked them, look forward to seeing if there's actually a response. You may have noticed something by now. It's only the crossbench publicly pushing this. It's almost like the crossbench are the only politicians we have free to act on their own conscience. So, how much does it cost taxpayers to persecute an Australian whistleblower?
Let's roll the tape on that.
The McBride case, as of the 30th of September 2023, the external legal costs are $2,092,430, exclusive of GST.
And do you have a more up-to-date? Can you provide a more up-to-date cost?
We'd have to take that on notice.
And do you have any assessment for the internal costs or the internal resources that have been spent trying to put this whistleblower in jail?
No, Senator, we don't record staff time in our national security information area.
And that's just external costs too. The real dollar figure is likely much higher.
Minister, do you think it's a sensible application of public funds to spend more than $2 million on external lawyers trying to put a whistleblower in jail?
I think the position of the Attorney General on this is known. I don't really have anything else to add, Senator Shoebridge.
I didn't hear that, sorry, Minister.
I think the position on this, the position of the Attorney General on this is known. I don't really have anything further to add.
Well, does the Attorney think spending more than $2 million on external lawyers to put a whistleblower in jail who blew the whistle on war crimes in Afghanistan is a sensible expenditure of public money? Is that the Attorney's view?
Well, it's a matter that's before the courts at the moment. The cases, my understanding, are proceeding. It's not really appropriate to comment any further on it.
What good are whistleblower protection laws if they can't effectively protect whistleblowers? What message does continuing to prosecute whistleblowers like David McBride send to others witnessing wrongdoing and weighing up whether or not they should come forward?
Every minute's delay in dealing with this matter and having these charges against the whistleblowers dropped is sending a signal to every single Australian that if you are witness to misconduct in this country, then the government will not support you, but will come after you, will shut you down and will prosecute you.
In continuing to allow the prosecutions of both David McBride and fellow whistleblower Richard Boyle, Mark Dreyfus is demonstrating he's just not up to the job. Mark Dreyfus can stop the nonsense right now. He has the authority under Section 71B of the Judiciary Act to decline to proceed further with the prosecution of David McBride.
I'm reminded of a quote from then opposition leader Anthony Albanese early last year when referring to witness Kay and Bernard Clary, and he made the point, and I'll quote the now Prime Minister, he said, "The idea that there should be a prosecution of a whistleblower for what's a shameful part of Australian history is simply wrong." And I read that and think about Mr McBride, the whistleblower who shone a light on the alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. that he should be facing prosecution is simply wrong. That Mr Boyle is facing prosecution is simply wrong.
If Mark Dreyfus is unable or unwilling to exercise that authority, maybe it's time for him to stand down and hand over the reins to someone that's willing to do the right thing.